For centuries, Rome was the center of the world, the heart of a massive empire that seemed like it would last forever. But in the year 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. The city of Rome was conquered by an invading army, something that hadn't happened in 800 years. This is the story of how it all went down, a tale of broken promises and desperation that brought the world's greatest power to its knees.
So you have to wonder, right? How does a city that calls itself the Eternal City, a place that ruled most of the known world, just fall? Well, the answer isn't a simple story of one big battle. It's way more complicated than that. It's a story about people, politics, and a clash between two very different worlds.
To really get this, we need to go back to the beginning. And the story doesn't start with an army trying to invade Rome. It actually starts with a group of refugees looking for a safe place to live. Let's talk about the Visigoths. So who were the Visigoths? They were a Germanic people, and they were in serious trouble. They were on the run, fleeing another, even fiercer group known as the Huns. They looked at the huge, powerful Roman Empire and saw it as their only shot at survival. So they went to the Romans and asked for protection, for permission to cross the border and settle on Roman land.
And this is where everything starts to go wrong. The Romans said yes, they let the Visigoths in. But then they treated them horribly. Imagine being promised safety and then being stuck in camps, starving, while corrupt officials take advantage of you. That's what happened. And this mistreatment went on for years, turning these desperate refugees into a furious and very capable fighting force.
All this anger and frustration eventually boiled down to a standoff between two key figures, the king of the Visigoths and the emperor of Rome. This was pretty much the point of no return.
The leader of the Visigoths was a man named King Alaric. And he wasn't just some barbarian warlord. He was a brilliant military commander who had actually served in the Roman army. So he knew exactly how they thought and how they fought. And his main goal wasn't to destroy Rome. He just wanted a permanent, safe home for his people. For years, he actually tried to get it peacefully through negotiation. The whole problem was a total clash of goals. Alaric was asking for land and fair treatment. Pretty reasonable, right? But the Romans just kept refusing to deal with him fairly. They saw the Visigoths as beneath them, people to be controlled, not partners to negotiate with. So with the door to diplomacy slammed shut, Alaric felt he only had one move left, to use his army to take what Rome wouldn't give.
And that decision led Alaric and his army right to the gates of Rome itself. The very heart of the empire was now under siege. The Romans were about to experience a shock they truly never believed was possible.
800. Just think about that number for a second. What does it even mean?
It's the number of years that Rome's walls had held strong against any foreign enemy. 800 years. Generations upon generations of Romans had lived and died with the absolute belief that their capital city was invincible. They called it the Eternal City for a reason. And that belief was about to be completely shattered.
At first, Alaric didn't even try to attack the walls. Starting in 408 AD, he just surrounded the city and cut off every road, every supply line. It was a slow, agonizing siege. Inside the city, things got desperate. Food ran out, disease started tearing through the streets. Finally, after years of failed talks and a long, painful siege, one day in August of 410, a gate was opened. The Visigoths marched in.
So How did these legendary defenses finally fail?
Well, the truth is, the Roman Empire wasn't what it used to be. The city's walls were massive, and they just didn't have enough trained soldiers to guard all of them. The few defenders they had were starving and exhausted. Plus, some historians think a traitor might have opened one of the gates from the inside, hoping to be freed.
Okay, so the Visigoths are inside the city. The word sack makes you think of complete and total destruction, right? Burning everything to the ground. But what Alaric had in mind was actually pretty surprising. Alaric's orders tell us exactly what his goal was. He gave his army 3 days to loot the city, to take all the gold, silver, and anything else of value they could find. But he gave very specific commands. Don't harm civilians unless you have to. Do not burn down the major buildings. And, incredibly, he ordered them to respect the Christian churches as places of sanctuary. This wasn't about destroying Rome. It was about taking its wealth and making a powerful statement. So while the physical damage wasn't as bad as it could have been, the psychological shock was just massive. For everyone in the Roman Empire, this was world-shattering. The idea that their sacred, eternal city could be broken into and looted by outsiders, it just destroyed their entire sense of security and who they were. The 3 days of looting came to an end, and the Visigoths actually left the city. But the impact of what they did would send shockwaves across the empire for decades, speeding up its final collapse. There was this famous scholar at the time named Jerome. He was living all the way in Bethlehem when he heard what happened, and his reaction really captures how everyone felt. He wrote, "The light of the world had been put out." To them, it felt like the end of civilization itself. And here's a strange final twist to the story. Alaric, the man who brought Rome to its knees, didn't get to enjoy his victory for very long. Just a few months after the sack, he died, suddenly, from an illness. And the legend is just incredible. His followers supposedly diverted an entire river, buried him with his treasure in the dry riverbed, and then let the water flow back over to hide his grave forever. The sack of Rome kicked off a massive domino effect. The central government lost all its authority. Other groups like the Vandals and the Franks saw that Rome was vulnerable and launched their own attacks. The empire, totally broke and militarily weak, just couldn't defend its huge borders anymore. The whole system of law and order that had held Europe together for centuries started to just fall apart. But it's really important to see this as more than just an ending, because as the old Roman power collapsed, it made space for new groups and new kingdoms to rise up. The Visigoths, for example, would go on to create their own kingdom in Spain. So this incredibly chaotic time was actually the messy, complicated birth of the nations that would one day become modern Europe. Which leaves us with a pretty huge question to think about. Was the sack of Rome the tragic end of the ancient world? Or was it the violent but necessary beginning of a new one? The truth is, it was probably both. It was the end of an empire, for sure, but it was also the beginning of the world that we live in today.